The rain had just begun, tapping softly against the metal skin of the B-24 Liberator Iron Widow, when Sergeant Mason Hale dragged his ammunition crates across the runway, boots splashing in cold puddles that reflected the early morning haze. The base at RAF Heatherfield was wide awake, engines warming, ground crews shouting, propellers chopping the damp air, another bombing run into the heart of Fortress Europe. But for Mason, a 22-year-old waist gunner from North Carolina, mornings weren't about nerves anymore. They were about calculation, about the unusual idea he had been obsessing over for the last 6 months, an idea that no officer had taken seriously, no manual had mentioned, and no training program had ever considered. Yet today, that idea would either make him a genius or get him court-martialed. Mason stepped onto the wet tarmac, the air buzzing with tension. The 8th Air Force had been losing aircraft at a terrifying rate. Flak guns below were tearing bombers apart night after night. Waist gunners like Mason were supposed to spray suppressive bursts, but the truth was uglier. Only 1 in 800 shots ever hit a flak gunner. The angles, the speed, the altitude, everything worked against them. And every time a bomber fell flaming from the sky, Mason's guilt grew heavier. He could still see the faces of 2 bombers lost last week, men he'd eaten breakfast with. And that's when the idea took root. Inside the hangar the night before, Mason had hunched over a crate with a mirror, gripped in his oil-stained fingers, adjusting angles under a lantern's wavering glow. A simple household mirror he'd taken from the barracks. A normal mirror until he discovered something insane. At 12 degrees downward angle, it revealed blind spot, targeting zones that no human eye could track directly. It let him see the exact flash timing of the flak cannon muzzles below, a standpoint that allowed prediction rather than reaction. No one had tried this. No manual taught this. But in his mind, it squeezed chaos into patterns. Today, he would use it in combat. For the first time, he climbed into the waist compartment of the B-24. Cool metallic surfaces glowing faintly under the red interior lights. The smell of cold steel gun oil and canvas met him like an old friend. He fastened the mirror device, a small steel bracket he had welded himself to the inside frame, beside his .50 caliber Browning. It pointed downward, angled sharply toward the ground. Still running with that toy Hale, Staff Sergeant McKinley, the tail gunner, grinned while adjusting his ammo belts. "It's not a toy," Mason said, tightening the last bolt. "It's math. It's a bathroom mirror." McKinley laughed. "But you'll scare the Germans with your reflection." "Maybe that helps." Mason didn't respond. He didn't need approval. He needed results. The engines roared awake, deep, thunderous vibrations that shook the airframe. As the bomber taxied toward the runway, Mason checked the mirror again. The reflection wasn't meant to show beauty. It showed timing. Every flash, every plume of dust from below. Every muzzle spark of anti-aircraft fire became magnified. Predictable objects in a controlled pattern. He believed that if he timed bursts before the flak crews fired, creating suppressive arcs ahead of their cycle, he could throw off their aim 3 seconds early. 2 seconds lateral, it was insane. No one had ever tried targeting coordination like this. But today, he with the B-24 lifted into the gray English sky. Engines straining, wings trembling, once they broke through the low clouds. Sunlight burst across the cockpit and filled the bomber with an eerie golden glow. The crew settled into the monotony of long flight, checking gauges, tightening straps, loading belts. Mason stood beside his gun, breathing calmly, eyes darting between the earth miles below, and the polished square of glass reflecting it. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. Almost too peaceful. Nav radio crackled. Enemy radar tracking. Flak belts ahead. Expect heavy resistance. The tension inside the bomber shifted. like a sudden drop in temperature. Mason gripped his Browning. He had studied the German flag patterns for months, their rhythm, their reload cycles, their three-gun staggered timing. He knew the angles where they tended to focus their bursts. And now through the mirror, he saw something the others didn't, the first spark of ignition far below, a flash tiny but unmistakable. "Here it comes." "Brace," the pilot yelled. The sky exploded. Black puffs tore open around them like monstrous flowers, blossoming from nowhere, shockwaves rattling the plane. Shrapnel whizzed past Mason's window like swarms of metal hornets. The bomber jolted hard left. Mason steadied himself and watched the mirror. There, the reload crew by the rail fence. One flag gun shifted 2 degrees inward. Another elevated by 3 clicks. The third waited still. He shouted into the intercom, "I have their timing firing early." "Negative," barked the co-pilot. "We need suppressive fire only." "No, we need predictive fire." Mason snapped. "Trust me." Silence. Then the pilot's voice, calm but heavy. "Do it!" Mason planted his feet, leaned into the Browning, and watched the mirror. The second he saw the faint muzzle glow building, he fired not at the flat gunner, but at where the barrel would be angled. 2 seconds later, the air filled with the rattling thunder of .50 caliber rounds. Below, dirt burst upward near the flag battery. The enemy gunners hesitated. 1 second. 2, 3. The next shell from the Germans detonated behind the bomber, completely mistimed. "Holy hell," McKinley breathed over the radio. Mason felt the adrenaline rush through his chest. It worked. Another flash in the mirror. Another burst. Another mistimed flak shot far below the formation. Ahead, 3 bombers, struggling in turbulence, suddenly stopped, taking direct hits. Mason shifted fire again, sweeping angled bursts across the new battery position. He detected from the flicker of movement in the reflection his mind. Ran calculations faster than fear could touch him. Incoming shell right side. He saw the spark 1 second too soon. He fired early. The German cannon buckled sideways from the splash of dirt and rock, the gun crew scattering. The B-24 lurched but wasn't hit. Mason's voice was steady, adjust altitude 2 degrees. "The next battery is 11 seconds ahead. They'll fire left to right." "How the hell do you know that?" the navigator asked. "I can see their spotters shifting." "Mirror shows the hand signal." A pause. Then the navigator whispered, "You're reading them like a book." Below them, a bomber in the adjacent formation caught a shell in the right wing. Fire erupted. Wingtips sheared off, and it spiraled downward in a trail of smoke. Mason clenched his jaw. He switched his angle eyes, scanning the mirror for the next signature. There a faint shadow. Another spark. He fired before the flash fully formed. The explosion from the ground came late. Too late to hit anyone. The pilot muttered, "This is insane." "Keep going, Hale." The crew followed his lead. Every round Mason fired redirected the Germans' rhythm. Every early burst broke their tempo. The once predictable deadly flak curtain became chaotic. Scattered, inaccurate, desperate. The bomber formation 12 aircraft began taking fewer hits, then almost none. For the first time in weeks, they were slipping through the flak belt intact. "Hale, we're through," the radio operator said in disbelief. But Mason didn't smile. Not yet the return. Journey was always worse. Hours later on the way home, the Germans threw their last wave of flak fire at the withdrawing bombers. Mason once again leaned into his mirror, now cracked from the vibration but still functional. He watched the ground distort in its reflection, every movement below magnified.